Hello, and welcome to session 3 of muscle identification. So we're going to do just a very few muscles in this session, and we're going to do muscles that are superficial in the anterior and posterior trunk. And we're going to start off with one that is probably familiar to most of you already, which is the pectoralis major muscle. And let's go ahead and get that information down into our list. And yeah, let's start with the pectoralis major. Pectoralis major, origin, the sternum, and costal cartilage, of ribs 2 through 6. Okay. The insertion is the greater tubercle of the humerus. And action is adducts and medially rotates the arm. Okay. Well, I think everybody knows where this muscle is located. Here it is. It's this muscle right here. That is the pectoralis major. Let's do the origin and insertions, and then we'll go ahead and talk a little bit about what that action is, and we'll see a couple of other images as well. So, origin, sternum and costal cartilage of 2 through 6. So there's 1, and here's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So basically what we're talking about, because we're going to use red, is this right here. Okay. And then the insertion is there. Okay. So let's talk about adducts. Immediately rotates the arm. Adduction of the arm is moving the arm in. Add. See that word add? So we're going to take the arm and move it in towards the midline. Medial rotation, that requires a little bit of explanation. So if you're looking at my hand and my thumb, and I move my thumb or rotate my hand such that the thumb it moves towards my midline, that's a medial rotation. So that movement is the medial rotation. If I go back, that's a lateral rotation. So your orientation is your thumb. What's happening to the thumb? Is it moving towards the midline? That's a medial rotation. If it's moving away from the midline, that's lateral rotation. Okay? And this is giving us a medial rotation. So a couple other images. There it is on the body. Okay. Here it is. Yet another image of it right here. So that's pretty straightforward and pretty easy. Okay, so that's the chest pectoralis major muscle. The next muscle that I want to cover is the deltoid muscle, and this is a muscle that we find basically on the shoulder. So the deltoid muscle, let's talk about the origin, and then the insertion, and then the action. So for origin, I'm going to start a little bit higher because I have 3 sources to write in. So I want to give myself a little bit of a space. So we're going to start with the anterior fibers. And this is going to be the distal. Oh, that's it. Distal clavicle. So the area of the clavicle furthest away from your midline. The lateral fibers, that's going to be the acromion. And that's a structure, as you recall, is part of the scapula. And then the posterior fibers, that's going to be the spine of the scapula. Okay. That's for your origin. The insertion is the deltoid tuberosity. And the action, and here again, I'm going to give myself some room because since I have three distinct origins, I'm going to have three distinct actions. So anterior fibers, is going to be flex and medial or medially rotate arm. We know what that means. The lateral fibers, the there's a B in there, abduct arm. And then the posterior fibers is going to extend and laterally rotate arm. So I'm getting a lot of different actions simply because of all these different origins. So let's take a look at that closely and see what we're doing there. So we're starting, I've got two images here, and we're going to start with the anterior. This is our anterior view. So the acromion there, and then the acromion and spine here. So basically I'm making a big U-shaped. If we're looking straight down at the body, we're going to see this kind of pattern. So this here, that would be this location, and this would be here. And then the arm, of course, is like that. So I have fibers coming in this direction, I have fibers coming in that direction, and I have fibers coming from the front of the body, from the posterior aspect of the body, from the lateral aspect of the body, and the anterior part of the body. And they're all inserting on this location right here. Okay. So let's go ahead and look at the drawing. So here it is right here. These are my anterior fibers and some of the lateral fibers. Here's my posterior fibers and some of the lateral fibers. Okay, so makes this big U-shaped pattern. And so flex and medially rotate the arm. Flexing the arm is this motion right here. So I'm bringing the arm up because that's these fibers right here. And I can also do that medial rotation. Both of those things are coming from the anterior fibers. The lateral fibers are the abduction of the arm, which is coming straight out this way. Okay, coming out this way. And then the posterior fibers are going to extend the arm, so I can flex and then bring it back using the same muscle, and I can also rotate my thumb to the outside using those posterior fibers back here. So I got a lot of different actions out of this muscle simply because of the wide distribution of the origin. So we've got a couple of images that will help us see that. So here is, this is my posterior fibers. Okay, so I'm coming from the arm on the back, sort of speak, this way. So we're coming around this structure there, okay. Let's see if I have another posterior view. I do. So here is my, anterior view. So here's my anterior fibers, and then my lateral fibers are literally on the side here. So I get this really very diverse. You can compare them. So there we go. So I can get, let's do it this way. There we go. That makes a little more sense. Okay, so anterior here, and then I come around to the back here. Okay. So, and then all inserting on one location on the arm, on the humerus, which is the deltoid. Okay. Okay, so that's our deltoid. Let's do the back now, and the back is going to consist of two muscles, the latissimus dorsi and the trapezius, and for both of those muscles we're simply going to do some actions. We don't need to do origins or insertion. So let's start with the latissimus dorsi, and let me put a pad underneath that so it's so much easier to write. This pad under there. So latissimus dorsi, the action extends, adducts, depresses, and upwardly rotates the let's see, extends, adducts, medially. Oh gosh, I'm getting these two things mixed up. So let's do this. Extends, adducts, and then it did start to sound a little bit weird. Medially rotates arm, and then draws arm inferiorly. Okay. And posteriorly. Okay, yeah, that's better. So latissimus dorsi, latissimus. These are the so-called lats. Maybe people say, "I'm on my lats today." Well, this is the muscle right here. And once again, we see a very, very, very broad origin, and then it's going to insert in near the intertubercular groove of the arm, and so we get this extending the arm, which is pulling it back, adducting the arm, which is pulling it in, medially rotates so we can spin the thumb towards the midline, draws the arm inferiorly and posteriorly. So this muscle, if you're a swimmer, particularly if you do a lot of butterfly, is very, very developed because you're using that muscle quite a bit and putting the arm forward and then dragging it back through the water. That muscle is being used quite a bit in that action. Okay, so that's the latissimus dorsi, and we've got a nice image of that right here. Okay, there it is right there, big broad muscle. And here's a slightly different view of it right here. Okay. You can see the very, very long and extended origin, and then following into the humerus, going into the humerus there. Okay. All right, the other muscle is the trapezius. And with the trapezius, again, we're simply going to do action. And here we're going to have two actions. So let's do one and then two. Trapezius is going to rotate adduct, depress, and upwardly rotates scapula. And number 2 stabilizes the scapula. All right, well, let's first identify the muscle on our drawing, and that's going to be this muscle right here. Let's go ahead and see an image of that. There we are. There it is. From actually, it's starting at here at the occipital bone and extends all the way down to, I think that's around T blah, I don't, somewhere around T11 or something, T10 maybe. But it's a very long origin, and so the fibers are approaching the shoulder in this direction, and this direction, and this direction. So if we look at the action, rotates, adducts, depress, and upwardly rotates the scapula. So upper this direction, depresses down this direction, and adducts bring it in towards the body because of the lateral fibers. So it can move the scapula, and then it can also stabilize the scapula. So here, one of the reasons I added this muscle is because it demonstrates something that does occasionally happen, in which we can switch origin and insertion. So if this is the origin, then that structure, which is the scapula, it's attached to the scapula, will move. And I can move it in different directions. Okay. However, if I decide I want to stabilize the scapula because I want to use these muscles that are attached to the scapula, then I can use that muscle to do it. And that means that this becomes the origin and this becomes the insertion. We flip them. This muscle is capable of doing both things. So the scapula, if you've looked at the skeletal system, and you may have noticed the scapula is just kind of sitting on top of the rib cage, on the posterior aspect of the rib cage. Nothing really ties that in except for the muscle tissue, and tendons and some ligaments are going to hold that in place. So it is a very movable bone, and that's something we wanted because we wanted that flexibility up here in the upper arm, if we talked about that. So if I have a lot of muscles attached to that and I want those muscles to have an origin as the scapula, that scapula cannot move. So I have to find a way to stabilize the scapula, and one of the muscles that does that is this muscle right here. The other thing I want you to notice is this very long tendon right here. So that's a very extensive tendon, and people have noticed that over a period of time, and wondering why that tendon is so well developed in this muscle. And the thinking now is that tendon is acting as like a kind of a spring. It stores the energy. So when we run, our head is stable on a platform that's moving. So our body is moving through space as we run, and we're jogging or running, and our body's going up and down. But our head, if you'll notice somebody who's jogging, take a look at next time see somebody runs past you, you'll see the head is stable. It's not moving up and down with the body. It's stable. And this is a very good thing for us to be able to do if we're hunting. We can keep our eyes on our game, because if our head was moving up and down every time we ran, every time we took a step, it would be hard to track game. And so how do we stabilize our head? Well, one of the things that happens is that this tendon will store energy when the head is moving in one direction and then release it as it moves the other direction to help it stabilize on this moving platform that we call our body. Okay? If you look at other animals like horses and other animals like that, when they run, their heads are moving along with their body. It's not very useful if you want to keep your eye on something. So that is the two muscles on the posterior part of the body, the latissimus dorsi and the trapezius. Okay. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the short presentation, session 3. And the next session will be on the arm muscles, which is probably the most complicated place as far as muscles are concerned. And then the last session will be on the legs. So I will see you there.